The new theater of the mind. The Bruce Collins Show.
Hello, friend. Welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight, we're going to talk about a paranormal flap occurring in Connecticut, according to our guest, William Hall, who has researched the goings-on in a Connecticut farmhouse, and he's written the book, The Haunted House Diaries. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight, right here at WWPR 1490 AM. You can listen to past archives of The Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a banner just for The Bruce Collins Show on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Click on the show banner and you will go right to our page. We would appreciate it if you are able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for The Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@AOL.com. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube channel. Visit YouTube. Search for The Bruce Collins Show channel. Subscribe and catch all the latest shows on YouTube. Again, our guest, William Hall, has researched the strange goings-on in a Connecticut farmhouse, and in so doing has written the book, The Haunted House Diaries. He joins us in a moment.
And we've got a great guest returning this week to the Bruce Collins Show. Now, following the rip-roaring success of his first bestseller about the world's most haunted house, and we were honored to have him on talking about that first book several months ago, William J. Hall is now keeping his readers up all night with a new spine-tingling book,
The Haunted House Diaries.
The true story of a quiet Connecticut town in the center of a paranormal mystery. A lifelong performing magician, a well-known researcher of unexplained phenomena, and a syndicated columnist, William J. Hall was drawn to investigate a notorious farmhouse in his home state of Connecticut. William J. Hall, welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back. It's great to be here.
Now, it's great to have you back on. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, can you give us the title of that first book? Because it was a great book also.
Oh, thank you. The World's Most Haunted House, the true story of the Bridgeport poltergeist on Lindley Street, which was it's written about in a number of books, but nobody had the full story, and I was honored to have those interview tapes released to me, and that's enabled us to tell the true story, the full story of that case that went around the world back in 1974. So that's what that was about.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, this book is The Haunted House Diaries, the true story of a quiet Connecticut town in the center of a paranormal mystery. And there's also a subtitle, Ghosts, Aliens, and Holes in Space and Time. William, can you give us some history? This is a very historic area, but can you give us some history on this area in Connecticut?
Well, this, if you follow up the road far enough, it's actually a straight line picking up where the Hudson Valley UFOs paranormal flap was. It's up much further north, but I mean, that's the area we're talking about, and it's parts of it are relatively rural in the Litchfield County area in Connecticut, and we discovered there's a long history of paranormal happenings there. So we believe there's a paranormal flap there.
Mm-hmm. Now, in a general overview of your book, what type of phenomena is occurring there?
Well, that's the beauty part. It's like my friend Paulino calls it a paranormal circus or a paranormal crossroads, and it's like a shopping mall for the paranormal. It's there's just about everything happening there. So there's UFO sightings, there's ancestors appearing, there are entities, there's cryptids, Bigfoot being, of course, the most popular of all cryptids, and there's even, we know there's a secret military base there. We don't know if it's related, but it certainly seems possible given all the strange things and energy that's going on in the area. So it's unique because, as a matter of fact, again, my buddy Paul calls it Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch, because the breadth and the variety of phenomena that goes on there is kind of encompasses just about everything in the paranormal, which of course tells us that this stuff is more related than our many years ago old school thinking, more in a siloed approach to phenomena.
Yeah. That's a great point, because even Point Pleasant, you think of the Mothman, and then when
Right.
you really actually drill down, you hear all these other stories of Bigfoot and aliens and all these other things. So there does seem to be a connection there. Now, part of your background includes being a magician, which deals with a lot of trickery and illusion. So I imagine you can look at this sometimes skeptically more so than others. So how did you become convinced this case in Connecticut was real?
Well, I really had it handed to me rather easily, I must admit, because again, my good friend Paul and Ben Eno, my good friends, they were on this case since 2005. So when I was having lunch one day with Paul, and he mentioned, hey, there's a case in your neck of the woods. Do you want me to talk to the family and get you involved? It's really one of the weirdest cases I've ever had in all my years investigating this. So I knew it had merit from the beginning because, I trust Paul. But the magic skills in my mind didn't come about as far as fraud, quote unquote. As a matter of fact, I find that there's less fraud in this area. There's some in like the UFO area, but there's less fraud and more misinterpretation. So I think the magic training broadened my mind as far as thinking of different ways that what we see or perceive could be different things. So I think it helped in that respect, and also made me realize that I needed to bring in the right experts for the right things. For example, for photo and video, I knew that I was no expert, so I brought in Mark D'Antonio, an astrophysicist, who's also the photo video expert for Mutual UFO Network, and he looked at all the photos. So I think in that respect, and matter of fact, I even have a chapter in the book, What Magic Has Taught Me About Interpreting the Paranormal. I think we try to connect things to our own, beliefs, and we interpret them in certain ways based on our experience. It's only natural. But I try to remind myself that it may not be what it appears to be, that it could be numerous things or a few different things, and it may be not even on the list of what I have. So I think that's where the training comes into play. And lucky enough, I've learned that really good paranormal investigators tend to be that way. Mm-hmm. And so that, that's a refreshing, insight to learn that, that they kind of share in that scientific inquiry.
Okay, so we're looking at this sort of like our interview tonight is a play, and the curtain opens, and we see a 1790s farmhouse and a diary. What's going on here?
Well, in the whole area, there's a very large area, kind of a triangular shape, where there's a heightened area of paranormal activity. And what I would say, for lack of a better term, at the epicenter is this farmhouse from 1793 that's surrounded on three sides by water, which we usually find in these kinds of cases. And that plus the age and the land and the area, this farmhouse, writing a diary, keeping a diary from when she was in her teenage years. So it spans 5 decades where she kept a diary of the variety of things that happened in the house. And what's unique about it is there's a lot of things that investigators have told me that they've never seen or experienced before. There's some of the kind of traditional stuff, the sounds in the walls and things like that. But I think that keeping that history was a really great thing, because it really gave us kind of an overview of 50 years of a haunting. And it was really neat, because when I met Donna, she told me that there's only been 3 owners of the home, 3 families that have owned the home, and her family line has owned the home for 6 generations. And so as far back as anybody can remember, there's been phenomena there. And she took out a box when I met her, because she had typed up, the original diary and gave it to me. And she said, "Mr. Hall, I don't want you to think that this is something I just typed up." She said, "I want to show you the original writings." And she brought out this box, and it had all these papers in it, manila paper, yellow paper, envelopes, all different kinds of papers throughout the years. Some dated, a lot dated, some not, of when she tried to capture this phenomenon, not in like a neat kind of notebook, but just, going through everyday life, trying to capture things, so that she could have a written record for future generations. And also, perhaps she's very inquisitive, and she was curious and about finding some sort of pattern and insight into the phenomena happening there, which luckily, for the most part, wasn't very negative. It was more fascinating.
Interesting. So a lot of your book is chock full, just like in your first book, of information and a lot of great pictures and a lot of content that we obviously can't touch on in an hour. But can you touch on some of the things that were written in the diary? What can readers expect to experience?
Oh, sure. One of my favorite stories, and there's, of course, children and animals, as we know, seem to be especially sensitive or open to this kind of thing. And Donna's grandson, right when he was beginning to talk, I mean, even when he couldn't really walk that well, would toddle over to the bathroom area and point up as if he was engaged, listening to somebody, and mesmerized, and they literally would have to grab him and take him back into the center of the living room. And then as he got older, he would go outside, put toys around the tree, and they would say, "What are you doing?" He'd say, "I'm putting toys out for Ashwar." And he would tell this story about saying that Ashwar is a little girl in a blue dress who was in a car accident with her mother and now is stuck in the tree to observe. And, of course, it's always a little girl in a blue dress, and we know that it's usually not a little girl in a blue dress, but that seems to be the go-to presentation in the literature. It was, very real to him. And, of course, they knew phenomena was in the house. Paulino, because he was investigating this case since 2005, he was there and talking to the grandson, and asked him about Ashwar, and said, "Is Ashwar here now?" And the grandson said, yes, yeah, she's right out there in the tree, out in the front yard there. He pointed out the window, and Paul said, so she's there now? He says, oh yeah, there she is. And he points up in the tree. So Paul went out with his infrared camera, and it was, dark outside, it was at night. And he didn't see anything, but he filmed up into the tree, and he caught this kind of tadpole serpent-like thing coming down in front of the tree and then dissipating into like a mist. And it's just a fascinating piece of video evidence. In fact, listeners can go to Haunted House. If you Google Haunted House Diaries and then put a space and put Ashwar, Ashwar, you can actually watch the video for yourself. It's fascinating. And what's neat is we ended up finding a gentleman from Florida, Gregory Harold, who for about 2 years in the 70s, he was investigating or trying to figure out, trying to catch vandals. So he hooked up cameras, and he ended up filming these things. And he studied their behavior and their size and what they were doing over a long period of time. And so we sent him the video, and he said, oh yeah, these are the things I've been filming. He's been filming a bunch of Ashwars, basically. And so I interviewed him and put his insights of what he's learned, and he sent me an hour and a half of film that he's taken of these things, and they look like Ashwar. So it's very intriguing. His theory is that they're aliens. Of course, who knows? Entity aliens, or is there a difference, or does there need to be? Is another question. But that's just an example of some of the bizarre things that have occurred with the family in that house.
Now, is this house unique in terms of haunting in this area?
Well, there are other houses, at least 5, and probably a lot more, but 5 that I've interviewed nearby that all have phenomena. None of which have phenomena of the depth and breadth that this house does. But the other houses aren't as old, so this is unique that it's historical. It's been around for so many years, so of course has a lot of stories and a lot of people living in it. But the other houses in the area, they do have certain amounts of phenomena, as well as even on the road. There's a famous road, Oak Avenue in Torrington, Connecticut, where a little boy's spirit is supposed to have been seen for many, many years. I tried to, I didn't see anything, but I mean, and there's all sorts of stories going back many, many years. Lots of Bigfoot sightings in the area. The land is very much supposed to be, guarded by Native American spirits, as Mohawk Mountain is nearby, which is now a ski resort. So, but it's just a fascinating area. But by far, this farmhouse and land there that this family is on is definitely more active than any of the houses in the area. But there's probably an untold amount of houses that have phenomena. At least 5. Actually, there's more than 5, because I know that a 6th was actually on a TV show relating to horses appearing and disappearing. So I know there's 6 at least, but I'm sure there's a lot more. And of course, certain people won't talk and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, the whole area is definitely ripe for that kind of activity, especially with all the water and the flow of water nearby.
Can you give us your own sort of tour of the farmhouse in terms of, I know starting with the basement that you and Paul and also, is it Ben, had some experiences in the basement. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I tell people I'm about as sensitive as, well, nothing, because I'm not sensitive at all. I have no real abilities as far as sensing these things at all. So if anyone was going to sense anything. I figured it wasn't going to be me. I really didn't expect anything. But I was in the basement. Donna was giving me a tour of the house, and I went to a part of the basement, kind of a thin hallway, and it's a really neat because, you know, a lot of the basement, of course, or most of it is unfinished. So you see the hand-hewn beams and the brick and, you know, that kind of stuff. So it really, I mean, just looks old. Mm-hmm. But you go down, I went down a hallway, there's 2 chairs at the end. And when I went to the end, I just felt like I was in the only way I could describe it is like a bubble of energy, and like there was hundreds of people around. And I remember reading a lot of this stuff in the literature and thinking to myself, you know, why can't these people describe it better? You know, I was trying to like understand what they were saying. It didn't make sense to me. And when I felt it myself, I'm like, oh, now I know why they have such a problem describing it, you know. Now that it's me, I understood. And so I explained to Donna what I felt, and I asked her if she felt anything, and she went over there. She said, no, I've never felt anything over here. She said, but it's funny you say that, because Paul and Ben said almost the exact same thing you said when they were here. And that fascinated me. And when Shane Searway, who's, you know, what I call the trifecta of the paranormal, he grew up in a haunted house, had a near-death experience, and he's also Native American, so he's extremely sensitive. But he said the reason that we felt something was on the other side of the wall was the workshop, which is one of the most active rooms in the house. But he went through also with different meters and stuff to make sure there's nothing electrical that would, cause, you to feel a certain way. So, you know, we really tried to keep our objective. We tried to make sure that we eliminated everything to get to the paranormal, because I knew, especially, you know, as a magician and an amateur scientist anyhow, that even though I knew there was legitimate phenomena there, because I was looking for it, I didn't want there to be confirmation bias. I wanted to be sure to eliminate those obvious things and make sure it truly is paranormal, and get rid of the other things. And, Mark D'Antonio was great to have there, because he's experienced the paranormal, and of course, truly believes in, UFOs, et cetera, and, knows they're real. But he is, as we call him, our resident buzzkill, because he's extremely tough on any evidence that you present. And, as much as, we joke with him about, you're such a buzzkill, it is great to have somebody like that, because you don't want to lose sight of any of that. Even though there's phenomena, you're still going to get all of the regular kind of stuff that you're going to get. In other words, when you take pictures, if you use flash, you're going to get reflections, so you want somebody there to be able to keep you in check. And, I try to constantly, through the investigation, ask myself questions and keep myself in check, remind myself, think like a skeptic, because, a good investigator, even one that believes, should be a healthy skeptic, because that's the only way you can differentiate between, misinterpreting things and, something that appears to be true phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the pictures you have in your book is a picture of a lady named Minnie Gray, who was the maternal great-grandmother of Donna. And there was a picture taken of a mirror, and they believe that Minnie Gray was actually, there's a figure within that mirror, and you have a picture of both of these. So there are dead relatives also at this house?
Oh yeah. Now, of course, whether they're dead or not, of course, depends on your interpretation, whether it's multiple universes and it's, a time kind of warp, or whether they're truly deceased, or there could be, of course, a combination of the two. But yeah, there's definitely ancestors showing up, and a lot of fascinating stories about that. I mean, Donna's daughter, Michelle, was entertained in the, in the crib by something. used to cry a lot, and all of a sudden, wasn't crying anymore, and clearly preoccupied by something that was keeping her entertained. And later on, when she was older, she saw a picture of her uncle and said, "Oh yeah, that's Uncle George. He used to come play with me when I was in my crib." So there's there's freaky things like that, and so there's stories like that of both ancestors as well as strangers, unidentified people, probably prior, for the most part, appears to be prior residents, as well as different kinds of entities that have been there. So yeah, it's just a variety of just about anything you can imagine.
Now, there's an interesting picture in this book, and again, this book is full of very fascinating pictures. But there's a picture of yourself and Mark D'Antonio and Ben Eno with a drone, and and there's a picture that the drone took. There's a red circle indicating something there. What do you believe is there?
Well, we were going, the first time Mark D'Antonio appeared there, we were walking in the backyard, and he started stamping his foot. And all of a sudden he goes, this is hollow here. He says, this is hollow land. And once you heard that and you look at it, you're like, well, it does look weird. And so we sent up a drone, Mark's drone, to kind of survey the area to get a better look at it, as well as, to look at, the rest of the area. And so, it's definitely a hollow area. We don't know what's there, but, that's an interesting component to it. And another side story, this demonstrates Shane's just a powerhouse when it comes to this. It was that cold, horrible winter, and Shane had stopped by for an overnight with me, and we're at the house, and he looks out the window and he says, we're missing something here. This has a lot to do with the land. And he says, I swear to God, he says, on the right side, he says, I could sense there's hollow ground here. And I was blown away because, I don't blame listeners if they don't believe it, because it's just crazy, but if you know Shane, you would know he's just, of course he doesn't charge for any of this, and he doesn't claim to be psychic or anything like that. More sensitive. I don't like the term psychic because there's a lot of baggage to it, but it fascinated me, and he was great to have on the investigation, because when he entered the house for the first time, before he did, I said, do you want to read the entries? And he said, no, I don't. He came in and described 4 or 5 things he sensed, and I can see Donna's face because she had written about these things over the years. And, he would come in and just say, I sense, train going by, I sense these cleric-like figures through the tree. He would say these things that she had written about, and of course I knew because I'd read it, and I'm like, oh my God, she wrote about this 20 years ago, and here he is, talking about it. So, so he was great to have there because, he really is sensitive to that. But yeah, he said even with snow covering the ground that area was hollow. So, we're not sure what's there. We haven't, dug up anything. It could be something unrelated, but, boy, I'll tell you, in this area, you just never know.
Yeah. Have they ever reported any kind of missing time or being transported somewhere else? Not the family themselves, but there has been missing time incidents in the area. Mark D'Antonio, in fact, had a missing time incident on Burr Pond, which is nearby, when he was a child, going to, a field trip. He had missing time and later had an implant removed. So, that story's in there. The other thing is there's a phantom house, the house that was there and then, vanished. And these are people that know the neighborhood and everything. It's a rather rural area, the place, that we're talking about. And,
And then there was this phantom, emergency scene, accident scene. And, the two witnesses I interviewed, this couple were, going down the road and came across this emergency scene, but it didn't quite make sense. The vehicles appeared to be older, like with the round hoods in the front. The vehicles were the wrong colors. The fire engines the wrong color for the town. The police officer's uniform wasn't quite right. And they literally had to, the guy who was driving literally had to go out of his way to get the police officer's attention, to even pay attention to him. Now, you come upon an emergency scene, normally you get too close. I mean, they're just yelling at you, get out of here and, turn around, or they have it, of course, set up all organized to kind of tell you, hey, you got to go here or whatever. And this guy was just kind of ignoring them until, they really went out of his way to say, hey, could you tell us what to do here, Mm-hmm. And finally, the guy said, turn around and, go. And they went and they couldn't find another way around, so they came back to the same road and then everything was gone. So, just, fascinating things. Another thing that could be, that I would interpret it as kind of the missing time, or at least having a time element to it, is when notes were left in the house, and from friends of theirs. And matter of fact, I could read that entry because I think that's a good example here. That was in the spring of 1979. And Donna says, this is kind of a strange thing. Last week, Mom opened her mailbox by the front door, and there was a note in it from two old friends. It said, sorry we missed you, Betty and Fred. The only people she knows by the name are Betty and Fred Wilcox. She hadn't seen them in nearly 30 years and said she'd have to locate their number and call them. She was clearly upset she had missed them. The writing on the note was in pencil and very shaky. The pencil had been pressed down really hard onto the paper. When she called them, they were very surprised to hear from her. They said they hadn't stopped by and didn't leave a note. In fact, they had not been in the area for years. Today she got a note from Ruby and Garnett. It was almost the same writing, sort of shaky and pressed deeply into the paper. She had not seen them in many years and commented that she would call them and have them over for lunch. That afternoon they appeared at the door. Mom welcomed them in and told them that she had gotten their note and was sorry she had missed them. They looked at each other, clearly puzzled. They looked at her and told her they had not left the note. They hadn't stopped, and in fact, had just decided to do so a few minutes before. They no longer live in the area, and it was an unplanned stop as they were just passing through.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Now, that's an interesting thought, because if the handwriting was similarly shaky and pressed down hard, was it notes from these people from many years before, or was it the same being writing these notes?
Right, and that's a great question for discussion. And of course, with quantum physics and what we've discovered over the last few years, I guess we'd say, well, it could be somebody from, it could be a parallel world intersect where an ancestor or friend or whoever is letting them know about something that's going to happen. And, one of the instances doesn't happen, but even that would make sense with quantum physics because there are many different realities. So, it could be that.
Yeah.
Or of course it could be something different depending on the interpretation. But that's what's fascinating about the things that happen is they present some really neat things to discuss, which is why I like part 3 of the book so much, is being able to kind of go through it and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And get some different thoughts on it, because it is a fascinating thing when you look at that kind of an entry, and some of those things in here that they've experienced. Like I said, investigators I've talked to said, never heard of anything like that. And other things, of course, are like banging the walls or something are, relatively common. But some of the things that happen in this house are just a very bizarre mix of things. Like Michelle's, Donna's daughter, in the backseat of the car, all of a sudden saying, when driving around, before I was your baby, I was, a poor boy, and I had to go house to house, and I begged for food, and, talking in this very serious voice, and, it's just bizarre, like I said, just the variety of things. And, so luckily most of them not negative, but certainly plenty of them are scary enough to make most people flee the house. Of course, Donna grew up thinking the paranormal was normal, so for her, they have the right attitude. I think if a different family was there, it could be disaster. But for them, they don't assume that bangings in the wall are demons. For example, so they have a kind of a different perspective on it, and therefore, because of that, they're not really shaken to believe that these things are quote unquote evil or whatnot. So,
well, and that's, again, I want to remind our listeners first that the book is The Haunted House Diaries, the true story of a quiet Connecticut town in the center of a paranormal mystery. Again, The Haunted House Diaries by William J. Hall. And that's what's so interesting. So there was the standard things you think about in a haunted house, the banging on the walls. Were objects flying through the air, things levitating?
Well, there was a person that levitated, and there were some objects, like in Michelle's house, that levitated. But there wasn't, and there's blinds curtains that fall off, things like that. But it's not a common kind of things flying around like in like a violent poltergeist circumstance, like in my first book. It's not like that. Mm-hmm. But they do have their things. There's a lantern in the living room that moves back and forth. Wouldn't be entirely out of the question for, a family get together to say, hey, how come, the chandelier's moving back and forth, or something like that. But it's not an unhealthy or scary, environment. And it's something that's very much part of their lives. I should say Donna and Bob, the couple that lives there now. But I wouldn't say it's all encompassing. They have a very full life. They do other things. It's not like the only thing. Donna is fascinated by it. So it's like I love it because it's a great place to go. Like I said, shopping mall for the paranormal, a great place to go where you can get, EVPs, or you can set up cameras. You can get different evidence and study it. Donna is very curious about it. And you're not like invading them, like if somebody has a problem, you have to go fix it. There are, of course, those groups that'll go and get a bunch of evidence and say, we don't know, good luck and goodbye. But, but it's a unique, experience because it's not just it's not 100% negative kind of thing. It's more fascinating and diverse. And so it's a great, place to go study, really, because every time, as Ben Eno said, every time you go there, there's something different.
Fascinating. Now, what conclusions or insights do you draw from these experiences that are going on there? What kind of ideas do you have about this kind of paranormal flap that is occurring?
Well, I think I think there are areas, as Shane explained, that, Native Americans didn't go and open up these portals or windows or whatever you call them. But they knew the kind of areas that would have them, perhaps, and that's kind of where they would go to congregate, knowing that they can, quote unquote, commune with the spirits. So, seeing that there was the kind of flow of water that there was, with the house surrounded three sides by water, conclude we already knew it there's a lot of arrowheads and things in the area, and there's Native American land there, and but Shane had concluded that they definitely invoke spirits to watch the land, and he had explained something that I thought was really cool, because he said it's not that their religion was correct, and it's not that witchcraft is quote unquote real. They're just tools, and if you focus the attention there, whether it's a rabbit's foot, whether it's different religions or beliefs or whatever, if you focus your attention properly, you could connect with something that's in a portal. Mm-hmm. And we don't know why these things would guard land, but we do know that there's certain things that would basically guard the land, whether it's for part of a witchcraft ceremony where they invoke spirits to guard land, or whether it's Native Americans that, we don't know if they're like volunteers in the paranormal world or what, but he explains that evidently, and this, I admit, sounds crazy. If I didn't know Shane, I probably would be saying this is ridiculous, but he's saying that clearly there's spirits invoked to protect the land, and they've accepted the family. The family is clearly not a threat. I think if you had a Lindley Street dysfunctional family in there, it'd be a disaster. I mean, the stuff coming through there would be horrible. But I think in this case, if something negative comes through, it sees right away there's really nothing there for them, because they're the right kind of people. They're just like I said, they don't interpret it in that way. They're they hear footsteps or whatever, they don't say, "Oh, that's the devil." Mm-hmm. So because of that kind of viewpoint they have, they're not really sending out the kind of frequency that attracts the kind of negativity that could come when you have the wrong kind of situation there.
Mm-hmm. What about the idea that, because I've interviewed more than one guest like yourself, for instance, Mary Joyce, who talk about areas that seem to have these paranormal flaps, and then there's some kind of secret military base nearby. Do you think that these correlate? Do you think that either A, the government is somehow looking at these situations, or could they be manipulating these situations?
I think they're looking at them. Maybe they're trying to manipulate them, but I think I think it's more reasonable to suspect that they. I mean, we know they know about them, because they know well and good about Bermuda Triangle, for example. I mean, everybody, if you have friends in the military or the Navy, it's very obvious that they know and accept that that's real. So I think they're there studying that energy and trying to capitalize on it, probably weaponize it, knowing us, but but for whatever reason, I do believe that's why they're there. Now, people can argue and say, well, ground submarine base and whatnot, but when you have armed military guards chasing people out of farmland, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. And that area now is all fenced off. But I mean, Paul and Mark on separate occasions were chased out, as well as other witnesses that I talked to are chased out by armed military guards. And I would think that it is, I'm not a conspiracy person, and matter of fact, none of us are. But we try to remain objective, but it certainly seems that there could be a connection. But when we looked into it further through some connections, we were told basically to back off. So, we do know there's something there, so that has been confirmed. Whether it's related, of course, we can't confirm it, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like you said, you've heard of it before, and, we know the government knows about this stuff as well as UFOs. So I would think that they are studying it, because they probably realize that is a method of transport for perhaps all the paranormal, including UFOs.
Yeah. When I've talked to people in UFOology, which I used to call ufology, but lately I'm hearing people say UFOology, so I'll use that. But when you talk to people in that vein, they tend to think that we will never have UFO disclosure from the United States admitting that this is happening, but that maybe if aliens wanted to let us know that they existed in a completely unfiltered way, that they would have to show us that. Is there any proof that ghosts, for instance, want us to know about them? Or they don't seem to mask themselves in a haunted house, so do you think we will ever make that connection in a full way? Or is it always going to be there's these ghosts down the street in a haunted house that are banging on the walls?
I don't think it's going to be everywhere at once, if that's what you're saying, kind of like a mass, we're outing ourselves,
Yeah, exactly.
But I do agree with you that there's both entities as well as ancestors, if you will, that want to make themselves known and do that by different means, and probably some of the, I guess, practical jokers, for lack of a better term, are probably labeled demons. There's a lot of these things that happen that, we interpret as evil, and we're very quick to use the term evil, that, when you look at it, you're kind of like, I'm thinking to myself, if I was a spirit, I probably would do that just to screw with people too, Mm-hmm. So I think we have to really remain open and be careful on how we label, them, as a singular kind of, feeling of, good, evil, whatever. Most of the time it's a mixture of things. Sure. Not that there's not negative entities. I believe there certainly are, and I'm not suggesting that there's not, but I think there's a lot of times, as us as humans, whatever we don't understand, we try to snuff out, and we're scared of, it's natural. But as far as to the question about, will they out themselves, so to speak? I think because I do believe the best theory is kind of a parallel world intersect, that stuff's going to happen kind of haphazardly, that it's not something that's going to happen everywhere at all times, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As far as UFOs, I think, of course, we think we're so great that, they should reveal themselves. But I mean, like Stanton Friedman says, there's squirrels in my yard, but I'm not going to go talk to them,
Yeah.
So I mean, it really, I don't think that's a good argument, saying that we have to, go and, that they have to reveal themselves. And, of course, people have, I heard this just last week. Somebody said to me, well, if there's UFOs, how come they didn't fly over the White House? I said, well, they did. You don't remember, or you don't know. Mm-hmm. They did fly over the White House, and they sent jets up twice, and they couldn't get them. They couldn't find them. They couldn't catch them. And then they announced, well, we couldn't catch them, but they're no threat.
Yeah.
So, it's wonderful, the American public, because, we have a very short memory, and we don't remember that in 1952, that there was a man, almost a public pressure, press conference, about UFOs seen in every state. We easily forget that and think it's just, everybody's crazy.
Yeah.
But,
one of the things about these different entities, I'll put it, ghosts, aliens, and Bigfoot, we don't really seem to know what they are exactly, and we don't know how to label them per se. And so we sort of have a certain knowledge of them. I wonder if they know each other better than we know them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think in some cases they probably do, in some cases they probably don't. There is, it's interesting you say that, because there is a history of quote unquote sky people, coming down over Mohawk Mountain, which is in this flap area. and at the same time in conjunction with Bigfoot sightings. So, which is rather odd for the two to be at the same place, same time.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, if we're having these experiences, I would imagine that they would run across each other as far as who they would run across or how many of the varieties of different things they would run across. Of course, that would be unknown, but I would think, if we have these Bigfoot and UFO experiences and different entity experiences, I think at some level they would run across it too, especially if they were interacting in these quote unquote, if they are parallel world intersects, if they're getting by that way or coming through that kind of portal, I would think some of them would. We just don't know if all of them would or to what extent, but I would imagine it would happen, definitely.
Interesting. And now again, the book is The Haunted House Diaries, the true story of a quiet Connecticut town, maybe not so quiet in some areas, in the center of a paranormal mystery by William J. Hall. Now, William, I understand our listeners will be able to hear parts of the captured video or see the video evidence. Can you touch on that?
Yes, there's of course the entity we talked about, Ashwar. There's a film of the grandson at the when he's pointing up at the ceiling and pronouncing Ashwar for the first time in a home video that's on the bonus page that comes with the book, as well as a video of a lantern swinging that the family filmed. So there's that. There's a bunch of photos that weren't in the book due to space, so that's shared there. And there's some new diary entries also that have happened since the manuscript has been sent in to kind of continue the story, as well as some EVPs, and I'm still trying to get more up there, but trying to get some of them cleaned up because some of them Donna had recorded in the early days with some primitive equipment, at least to us modern people. So, but yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there, and I'm trying to give a good value for it. So I think readers will enjoy it, I hope.
Absolutely, and this is a real page turner. Again, The Haunted House Diaries by William J. Hall. Now, before you go, tell us where people can order your book, and tell us again. I know you've touched on this, but where people can go online to find out more information about you and your books.
Well, the one place you can go is WilliamJHallAuthor.com, and I'd be happy to send you a signed copy of either book or both. There's some free things you can get on the website, so you can go there and find out all the information. As far as where the book is sold, it's also sold everywhere else. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your independent bookseller, or like I said, you can get a signed copy from me. So that's about it. So
excellent. WilliamJHallAuthor.com. Go there tonight and check out the book, The Haunted House Diaries. William J. Hall, I hope you can come back sometime. This is always great when you're here talking about these haunted houses. Thank you, William.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank William Hall for joining us this week. Interestingly enough, he puts up an argument that these beings are not demons. But it seems obvious that if these events are actually going on in Connecticut, these beings seem to be coming from the same realm. Demons, from this radio host perspective, seem to be the likely culprits.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bruce Collins Show, where you can find us every Friday night at midnight here at WWPR 1490 AM. Remember, God loves you. We do too. Don't give up.